Hello there and welcome to Science for Sleep, where curiosity drifts gently like marine snow, and questions settle softly in the quiet spaces of your mind. Tonight, we're descending into one of evolution's most beautiful paradoxes, a place where the biggest creatures on Earth live in the smallest spaces, where giants move through liquid darkness like slow dreams made flesh. Imagine holding a teacup in your palm. Now picture a jellyfish bell so wide it could use that teacup as a thimble. Somewhere beneath the waves tonight, in water so deep that entire mountain ranges hide below, creatures exist that dwarf the animals we know. Squid, with arms longer than subway cars, worms that stretch like living garden hoses, spiders with legs that could span your dining room table. This isn't mythology, this is the deep sea, where being enormous isn't excess but necessity, where the physics of survival get rewritten in crushing darkness, where evolution whispers a secret that sounds impossible until you hear the logic behind it. But sometimes, in the coldest, most unforgiving places on our planet, the best strategy for life is simply to grow impossibly, beautifully, impractically large. So tell me, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it in your part of the world? Whether you're tucked into bed in a quiet suburb, or perhaps listening during a late shift somewhere across the globe, I'm truly grateful you've chosen to explore these mysteries with me. Let's dive into this mystery together. What exactly do we mean when we speak of giants in the deep sea? The word carries different weight down there, measured not just in size but in the strange mathematics of survival. When we say giant, we're not talking about the blue whale, magnificent as it is, cruising through sunlit water. We're speaking of creatures that have stretched beyond all reasonable proportion in places where reason itself seems to dissolve. Consider the colossal squid, Masinacochaethus hamiltoni, whose mantle alone can reach 4 meters in length. Add its arms and tentacles, and you're looking at an animal that could drape itself across a basketball court. Its eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, are the largest in the animal kingdom. Not the largest for a squid, the largest period. In the deep waters off Antarctica, where this creature hunts in eternal darkness, those eyes gather every available photon like biological telescopes scanning liquid space. Then there are the giant tube worms of hydrothermal vents, Riftia, Pachyptia, swaying 8 feet tall around underwater geysers. No mouth, no stomach, yet they thrive by housing bacteria that feast on toxic chemicals. They are living chimneys, filtering life from poison in a partnership so intimate it blurs the line between individual and ecosystem. Or take Parthenomus giganteus, the giant isopod, looking like an armored pillbug that wandered through Alice's looking glass and decided to stay. 20 inches long and built like a submarine, it crawls across abyssal plains where food falls like rare snow. Its smaller cousins on land measure barely an inch. Down in the deep, it has become a gentle giant, capable of surviving years without a single meal. The Japanese spider crab, Macrochera campheri, stretches its legs across 12 feet of seafloor. If you placed one in your living room, its limbs would touch opposite walls. It picks its way across the bottom of the Pacific like a walking table, ancient and deliberate, each step a meditation on patience. These are not anomalies. They represent a pattern that emerges again and again as we descend through the ocean's layers. Amphipods, that should be the size of rice grains, become as large as your thumb. Sea spiders that typically span a few centimeters stretch to nearly 2 feet across. Jellyfish that pulse gently in surface waters grow bells wider than umbrellas when they drift into the abyss. The geographic distribution of these titans reveals fascinating patterns. Arctic and Antarctic waters seem particularly fond of growing giants. The colossal squid prefers the frigid southern ocean. Giant basket stars unfurl their branching arms in polar seas. Even common creatures like sea stars and sea urchins reach extraordinary sizes in cold polar waters. There's something about the combination of cold temperature, high oxygen content and seasonal stability that encourages this evolutionary gigantism. But the phenomenon isn't limited to the poles. The deep Mediterranean harbors giant red mysid shrimp. The abyssal Pacific nurtures enormous xenophyophores, single-celled organisms that can grow larger than dinner plates. In the deepest trenches, amphipods the size of small fish scavenge in places where the pressure would instantly crush most surface life. Temporal patterns matter too. Many deep-sea giants are creatures of deep time, species that have been experimenting with size for millions of years. The nautilus, with its coiled shell, has been perfecting its design since before the first fish developed jaws. Some deep-sea corals, though they grow slowly, can live for thousands of years, accumulating size the way mountains accumulate snow. The very definition of what constitutes gigantism shifts as we dive deeper. The ghost shark, 2 meters long, seems almost modest compared to its surface relatives, yet for the deep-sea environment it inhabits, this represents extraordinary size. Scale becomes relative, measured not just against human dimensions, but against the biological possibilities of each particular depth and habitat. Some giants emerge through colonial cooperation. The siphonophore Praia dubia can stretch 40 meters in length, longer than a blue whale, yet it's not a single animal but a colony of specialized individuals working in perfect coordination, each component no bigger than a grape. Together they form one of the ocean's longest creatures, a living string of pearls drifting through the midnight zone. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. On land, on the surface of the sea, there are rules about size, energy cost, structural limitations. The square cube law that says as animals get bigger, their weight increases faster than their strength. Yet somehow, in the crushing depth, these rules seem negotiable. The deep sea has found ways to rewrite the very physics of being alive. The scale of these transformations challenges our understanding of evolutionary possibility. A giant isopod is not simply a larger version of its terrestrial cousins. Its entire physiology has been reimagined. Its metabolism slowed to a whisper. Its digestive system expanded to process massive, infrequent meals. Its exoskeleton reinforced to withstand pressures that would collapse lesser armors. The distribution of these giants tells its own story. They cluster most densely between 1,000 and 4,000 meters down, in that twilight realm called the bathyal zone. Some venture deeper, into the abyssal plains where pressure could crush a human submarine like an aluminum can. Others rise higher during their daily migrations, following food sources through vertical columns of water that span miles. What unites them all is this: they live in a world that operates by different principles than the one we know, where darkness is not the absence of light, but the presence of possibility, where cold is not discomfort, but efficiency, where pressure is not crushing weight, but creative force, and where growing large is not excess but the most elegant solution to problems we are only beginning to understand. The deep-sea giants remind us that our surface intuitions about what works, what survives, what thrives, are exactly that. Surface intuitions. Down there, in the liquid cathedral of the abyss, evolution has been quietly composing symphonies in a different key, entirely. Pressure, in the deep sea, is not the enemy we might imagine from our surface perspective. Down there, in the crushing depths, pressure becomes something far more interesting than a force to resist. It becomes an architect, a sculptor, a creative partner in the ancient dance of evolutionary design. To understand how pressure shapes giants, we must first grasp the sheer magnitude of what we're discussing. At sea level, the atmosphere presses down on us at 14.7 pounds per square inch. We don't notice this because we evolved with it. Our bodies perfectly calibrated to this gentle weight, that descend into the ocean, and every 33 feet adds another atmosphere of pressure. At 1,000 meters down, where many deep-sea giants make their home, pressure reaches 100 atmospheres. That's nearly 1,500 pounds pressing on every square inch of surface. For a human, this would mean instant death. Our air-filled spaces, our lungs, our sinuses, would collapse like empty soda cans. Our cell membranes would rupture. The very proteins that keep us alive would denature and cease to function. And yet, in this crushing environment, creatures not only survive but grow to magnificent proportions. The secret lies in understanding pressure, not as a wall, but as a medium. Deep-sea giants don't fight pressure, they swim in it. Their bodies are designed without the air spaces that would collapse. No swim bladders filled with gas. No hollow bones. Instead, their tissues are saturated with incompressible fluids that match the pressure around them. They become pressure neutral, neither crushed by the depths, nor buoyant toward the surface. But pressure does more than simply allow survival. It actively encourages gigantism through the elegant mathematics of physics. Consider how pressure affects the behavior of gases dissolved in water. Under extreme pressure, more oxygen can be dissolved in the same volume of seawater. This creates a paradox that works in favor of larger organisms. While the pressure makes gas exchange more challenging, it also makes each exchange more efficient. The water around deep-sea giants is packed with more dissolved oxygen than surface waters, gram for gram. This pressurized environment also changes the fundamental physics of cellular structure. Cell membranes, those delicate boundaries that separate life from non-life, must be specially constructed to remain flexible under pressure. Deep-sea creatures solve this by incorporating more unsaturated fatty acids into their membranes, keeping them fluid when they should become rigid. But here's the remarkable part. Larger cells, with their reduced surface area to volume ratio, are actually more efficient under pressure. They lose less energy maintaining their structural integrity, freeing up resources for growth. The pressure also affects how proteins fold and function. Every enzyme, every structural protein in a deep-sea creature must be precisely tuned to operate under crushing force. This molecular fine-tuning often results in proteins that are more efficient than their surface counterparts. They're like precision instruments calibrated for an extreme environment. And often these pressure-adapted proteins work best in larger quantities, in larger organs, in larger bodies. Temperature plays a crucial supporting role in this pressure-size relationship. The deep ocean is cold, typically hovering just above freezing. Cold water is denser than warm water, and this density difference creates interesting buoyancy dynamics. Larger organisms, with their greater mass, can more easily maintain their position in the water column. Without constant swimming, they become living submarines, perfectly balanced between sinking and floating. The combination of pressure and cold also affects metabolic rates in ways that favor gigantism. Chemical reactions slow down in cold, high-pressure environments. This might seem like a disadvantage, but for deep-sea creatures, it becomes a strategic advantage. Their slower metabolisms mean they need less food, less energy, less of everything except time. And time, in the deep sea, is abundant. Pressure also shapes the very architecture of how these giants are built. Surface creatures often rely on rigid structures, bones and shells that resist compression. But deep-sea giants take a different approach. They build with flexible materials that bend rather than break. Their bodies become fluid sculptures, held in shape not by rigid frameworks but by the pressure itself. The external pressure actually helps maintain their form, like an invisible exoskeleton pressing inward from all directions. This pressure-assisted architecture allows for body plans that would be impossible on the surface. A giant jellyfish bell, stretched thin as tissue paper, maintains its shape through the balance of internal and external pressures. A colossal squid's massive mantle stays firm not because of internal support structures, but because the crushing depth provides the support from outside. The digestive systems of deep-sea giants also benefit from pressure in unexpected ways. High pressure aids in the breakdown of complex molecules, making digestion more efficient. The crushing force helps extract more nutrients from scarce food sources. It's as if the entire ocean becomes a pressure cooker, helping these creatures process their rare meals more completely. Even reproduction benefits from the pressure environment. The increased density of seawater means that eggs and sperm can remain viable longer after release. The pressure helps maintain the structural integrity of reproductive cells as they drift through the water column seeking each other. This extended viability increases the chances of successful reproduction, a crucial advantage in an environment where encounters between individuals are rare. Perhaps most remarkably, pressure appears to directly influence gene expression in ways that promote larger body size. Recent research suggests that the physical force of pressure itself can trigger cellular pathways that encourage growth. It's as if the crushing depths whisper to each cell, grow larger, build stronger, become magnificent. The deep-sea giants have learned to read pressure like a language, to interpret its crushing embrace as an invitation rather than a threat. They have discovered that in a world where the very environment seems designed to compress and constrain, the most elegant response is not to resist, but to expand, to grow, to become so large that pressure becomes not a burden but a foundation upon which to build extraordinary life. The deep sea is a desert, not the kind with sand and cacti, but something far more austere, a liquid desert, where food drifts down like snow that falls perhaps once a year if you're lucky. In this vast emptiness, where a single meal might have to sustain life for months, evolution has discovered something counterintuitive. Sometimes the best strategy for surviving famine is to grow enormous. This seems backwards to our surface logic. Bigger animals need more food, don't they? Elephant consumes vastly more than a mouse. A blue whale filters tons of krill each day. But the deep sea operates by different mathematics, where the relationship between size and hunger follows curves that bend in unexpected directions. The key lies in metabolic scaling, one of biology's most elegant principles. As animals grow larger, their energy needs don't increase proportionally with their size. Instead, they follow what's called a 3/4 power law: double an animal's weight, and its metabolic rate increases by only about 75%. This means that pound for pound, larger animals are more energy efficient than smaller ones. They burn fewer calories per gram of body weight. In the deep sea's economy of scarcity, this efficiency becomes a survival advantage of extraordinary importance. A giant isopod, weighing several pounds, requires proportionally less food than dozens of smaller crustaceans of equivalent total weight. It's like the difference between heating one large house versus 20 tiny cabins. The single large structure uses energy more efficiently. But the advantages of size in a food-scarce environment extend far beyond simple metabolic math. Consider the engineering of appetite itself. Larger animals can afford larger mouths, larger stomachs, larger digestive systems. A colossal squid's massive beak can tackle prey that smaller squid couldn't even attempt. Its enormous stomach can process meals that would be impossible for a creature a tenth its size. This scaling of digestive capacity becomes crucial when food arrives unpredictably. In the deep sea, you don't browse and graze like a deer in a meadow. You feast when opportunity presents itself, then fast until the next windfall arrives. Giant deep-sea creatures are built like living storage tanks, capable of consuming enormous meals when they're available, and then slowly metabolizing those reserves over months or even years. The giant tube worms around hydrothermal vents demonstrate this principle beautifully. They don't hunt at all in the traditional sense. Instead, they've grown large enough to house vast colonies of bacteria within their tissues. These bacteria harvest energy from the toxic chemicals spewing from the vents, essentially farming food inside the worm's own body. The larger the worm, the more bacterial farmland it can support, the more energy it can produce. Energy storage scales magnificently with size. Larger animals have proportionally more space to store fats, oils, and other energy-dense compounds. A giant deep-sea fish might store enough energy in its liver to survive for over a year without feeding. Smaller fish, with their limited storage capacity, would starve in weeks under the same conditions. The mathematics become even more favorable when we consider the costs of movement. In the deep sea's cold, dense water, swimming requires significant energy. But larger animals are more hydrodynamically efficient. They can glide farther on each stroke, coast longer between movements. Some deep-sea giants have perfected the art of neutral buoyancy, hovering motionless in the water column, like biological satellites, expending almost no energy to maintain their position. This energy conservation extends to hunting strategies. Smaller predators often must actively search for prey, burning calories as they swim through the darkness. But giants can afford to be patient. They can hover in productive areas, waiting for food to come to them. The anglerfish exemplifies this approach, using its bioluminescent lure to attract prey while remaining perfectly still. Its enormous mouth can engulf creatures much larger than what smaller predators could handle. The feeding apparatus of deep-sea giants reflects this feast or famine lifestyle. Their jaws often unhinge or expand dramatically. Their stomachs can stretch to accommodate prey larger than their own heads. These adaptations would be wasteful excess in a food-rich environment. But in the deep sea's economy of scarcity, they're the difference between survival and starvation. Temperature amplifies these advantages. The deep sea's near-freezing water slows all biological processes, including digestion. While this might seem like a disadvantage, it actually works in favor of giants. Their slow metabolisms mean they can extract every possible calorie from their rare meals. They digest food with the thoroughness of master chefs, breaking down proteins and fats with patience that smaller, faster-burning animals can't afford. The seasonal patterns of food delivery also favor larger size. In many parts of the ocean, the greatest abundance of marine snow falls during spring, and summer blooms at the surface. This creates a boom and bust cycle in the deep. Creatures that can gorge during the productive months and then coast through the lean periods have a tremendous advantage. Size provides the storage capacity and metabolic efficiency to ride out these cycles. Even the quality of food in the deep sea encourages gigantism. Much of what drifts down from the surface is partially decomposed, lower in nutritional value than fresh prey. Larger digestive systems with more surface area for absorption and longer processing times can extract more nutrition from these degraded food sources. It's the biological equivalent of having a more sophisticated refinery that can process lower-grade raw materials. The social aspects of feeding also shift with size. In an environment where encounters with other creatures are rare, being large enough to consume whatever you meet becomes valuable. Deep-sea giants don't have the luxury of being picky eaters. They've evolved to be opportunistic omnivores, capable of processing anything from falling whale carcasses to tiny crustaceans. Perhaps most remarkably, some deep-sea giants have learned to turn scarcity itself into abundance. The vampire squid, when food is truly scarce, can actually digest parts of its own body and then regenerate them when conditions improve. Its large size provides enough reserves to survive this desperate strategy. The deep sea's food web operates more like a savings account than a flowing river. Energy arrives in large, infrequent deposits rather than steady streams. In this economic system, being large means being wealthy. It means having the storage capacity to hoard resources during times of plenty, and the efficiency to make those resources last through the inevitable famines. The giants of the deep have learned that in a world of scarcity, excess is not waste but wisdom. Their enormous bodies are not greedy consumption but elegant efficiency. Proof that sometimes the best response to having less is simply to become more. They are living treasuries, banking energy against the lean times that define their world, growing large, not in spite of hunger but because of it. In the deep ocean, cold is not an obstacle, but an ally. Temperature shapes life there the way a potter shapes clay, slowly and with infinite patience. The abyssal waters hover just above freezing, a steady 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, colder than your refrigerator, and more constant than any climate on Earth's surface. In this liquid winter that never ends, evolution has discovered that cold itself can be a pathway to becoming magnificently, improbably large. Cold water changes the fundamental chemistry of life. Molecules move more slowly in frigid temperatures. Chemical reactions that would race along in warm water proceed at a gentle crawl. This might seem like a disadvantage, but for deep-sea creatures, it becomes the foundation of an entirely different approach to existence. When your metabolism runs at the speed of geological time, you can afford luxuries that faster-living creatures cannot. The relationship between temperature and body size follows ancient biological laws. Bergmann's rule, first observed in ream-blooded animals, suggests that creatures in colder environments tend to be larger than their relatives in warmer regions. The principle holds true in the ocean's depths, but for different reasons. Cold water is denser than warm water, and this density creates a buoyancy environment that favors larger body plans. Consider how temperature affects the very building blocks of life. Proteins, those molecular machines that drive every living process, must be specially engineered to function in near-freezing water. Cold-adapted proteins are often larger and more complex than their warm water counterparts. They require more sophisticated folding patterns, more intricate structures. These elaborate protein architectures often work best when they're part of larger biological systems, driving the evolution of bigger bodies to house them effectively. The chemistry of oxygen solubility reveals another advantage of cold water for giants. As temperature drops, water can hold significantly more dissolved oxygen. The frigid depths contain oxygen concentrations that would be impossible in warm surface waters. This oxygen-rich environment can support the metabolic needs of larger organisms more easily. It's as if the cold water becomes a more concentrated life support system, dense with the very element that powers cellular respiration. Cold temperatures profoundly affect how creatures grow and develop. In warm environments, animals often race through their developmental stages, reaching maturity quickly to take advantage of favorable conditions. But in the stable cold of the deep sea, there's no rush. Development can proceed slowly, methodically, allowing for the construction of more elaborate body plans. Some deep-sea creatures take decades to reach maturity, slowly adding size year after year like living glaciers accumulating ice. This extended development time allows for what scientists call indeterminate growth. Unlike mammals which stop growing once they reach adult size, many deep-sea creatures continue growing throughout their lives. In the cold depths, Where metabolic processes are slowed, this continuous growth can continue for centuries. Some deep-sea corals are thousands of years old, still slowly adding to their massive structures generation after generation. The thermal stability of the deep ocean creates another advantage for large body size. Surface waters experience dramatic temperature swings with seasons and weather patterns. These fluctuations require constant metabolic adjustments, energy spent simply maintaining internal balance, but the deep sea maintains temperatures within a fraction of a degree year-round. This thermal constancy means that large, slow-warming bodies don't need to waste energy on temperature regulation. They can simply match the stable environment around them. Cold water also affects the efficiency of muscular movement in ways that favor larger animals. Muscle contractions are less efficient at low temperatures, but larger muscles maintain their function better than smaller ones in the cold. A massive deep-sea fish can generate more effective propulsion per unit of energy than a smaller relative struggling with cold-stiffened muscle fibers. Size becomes a buffer against the physical limitations that cold imposes on movement. The seasonal temperature cycles that do exist in the deep ocean are incredibly subtle, often linked to deep water formation events that occur thousands of miles away at the poles. These gentle, long-term temperature variations create environmental rhythms measured in decades rather than months. Organisms that live long enough to experience multiple cycles, which generally means large organisms with extended lifespans, can optimize their life strategies around these vast temporal patterns. Temperature also influences the structure of cell membranes in profound ways. In cold water, membranes tend to become rigid and less permeable. Deep-sea creatures combat this by incorporating special fatty acids that maintain membrane fluidity even at near-freezing temperatures. But these specialized membranes work most efficiently when they're part of larger cellular structures. The physics of membrane function actually favors larger cells in cold environments, which in turn supports larger overall body size. The interaction between cold temperature and high pressure creates a unique thermodynamic environment found nowhere else on Earth. This combination affects how gases dissolve in body fluids, how proteins fold, how enzymes catalyze reactions. The biochemistry of life under these conditions often works best at larger scales, where the surface area to volume ratios allow for more efficient heat and chemical exchange. Cold water slows decomposition processes, which affects the entire deep-sea ecosystem. Organic matter that falls from above persists longer in the frigid depths, creating more stable food sources. This predictability favors larger organisms that can take advantage of persistent food sources, rather than racing to capture ephemeral resources before they decay. The reproductive strategies of deep-sea creatures also reflect the influence of cold temperatures. Eggs and larvae develop slowly in frigid water, but this extended development time allows for the formation of larger, more robust offspring. Parents can invest more energy into each individual egg, creating larger hatchlings that are better equipped to survive in the harsh deep-sea environment. Even the physics of sound transmission changes in cold, dense water. The sound travels differently, allowing larger creatures to communicate across greater distances, with lower frequency calls. The massive bodies of deep-sea giants can produce and detect sounds that would be impossible for smaller animals, creating acoustic landscapes that span entire ocean basins. The deep sea's cold embrace doesn't fight against life but partners with it, creating conditions where slow growth, patient development, and massive final size become not just possible, but optimal. In these frigid depths, cold is not death but a different kind of life, one that moves to rhythms measured not in heartbeats but in decades, creating creatures so large and so enduring that they seem to belong more to geology than biology. Oxygen in the deep sea presents one of evolution's most beautiful paradoxes. The deeper you descend into the ocean's layers, the more scarce this vital element becomes. Yet somehow the creatures that call these oxygen-poor depths home have grown to enormous proportions. It seems impossible, like finding the largest flowers in the desert's driest places, but the mathematics of breathing at depth reveal why sometimes less oxygen can actually support more life. The oxygen minimum zone, that layer of water between 200 and 1,000 meters deep, contains some of the lowest oxygen concentrations in the ocean. Here, dissolved oxygen levels can drop to less than 1% of surface concentration. Most surface creatures would suffocate in minutes in such conditions. Yet, this zone teems with giants. Massive jellyfish pulse through oxygen-starved water. Enormous squid hunt in near-anoxic darkness. Giant siphonophores drift like living ribbons through water that should be lifeless. The secret lies in understanding how surface area relates to volume, a relationship that becomes increasingly favorable as organisms grow larger. Every cell in an animal's body needs oxygen to survive. That oxygen must travel from the external environment, through the creature's respiratory surfaces, and into the bloodstream. Smaller animals, with their high surface area to volume ratios, lose oxygen rapidly through their skin and gills. They're like leaky balloons, constantly hemorrhaging the very gas they need to survive. But larger animals play by different rules. As creatures grow bigger, their volume increases much faster than their surface area. The giant deep-sea creature has proportionally less surface area through which to lose oxygen, and proportionally more internal volume in which to store it. They become living oxygen reservoirs, hoarding this precious gas in specialized tissues and blood cells designed for maximum efficiency. The blood chemistry of deep-sea giants reflects this adaptation beautifully. Many possess blood with oxygen-carrying capacity that far exceeds that of surface dwellers. Giant tube worms have blood so rich in hemoglobin it appears bright red, even in the deep sea's darkness. Colossal squid blood contains copper-based hemocyanin that binds oxygen more efficiently in cold, low-oxygen environments than iron-based hemoglobin ever could. Larger gills and respiratory surfaces scale magnificently with body size. A giant deep-sea fish might have gill surfaces with thousands of times more area than its smaller relatives. These massive respiratory organs can extract oxygen from water with extraordinary efficiency. They're like biological refineries, designed to concentrate and purify the thin oxygen resources of the deep into life-sustaining fuel. The metabolic advantages of size become crucial in low-oxygen environments. Larger animals have slower metabolic rates per unit of body weight, meaning they need less oxygen per gram of tissue. A massive deep-sea creature might consume oxygen at 1/10 the rate of an equivalent weight of smaller animals. In an oxygen-poor environment, this efficiency can mean the difference between thriving and dying. Some deep-sea giants have evolved extraordinary oxygen storage systems. Sperm whales, though they visit the surface to breathe, can store enough oxygen in their muscles and blood to sustain hour-long dives to the deepest parts of the ocean. Their massive bodies serve as living scuba tanks, packed with oxygen-rich myoglobin that releases its precious cargo slowly during extended deep-sea hunts. The physics of oxygen diffusion also favors larger organisms in low-oxygen environments. Oxygen molecules move through tissue by diffusion, spreading from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. In a large animal, oxygen has farther to travel from the respiratory surfaces to the deep tissues, but the creature's slower metabolism means those tissues don't consume oxygen as rapidly. The result is a more stable oxygen gradient that can sustain larger bodies, even when external oxygen is scarce. Temperature plays a supporting role in this oxygen story. Cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water, but it also slows the metabolic processes that consume oxygen. Deep-sea giants benefit from both effects. The frigid depths provide more oxygen per liter of seawater, while their cold-adapted metabolisms burn through that oxygen more slowly. They're like efficient engines running on premium fuel. The structure of respiratory surfaces in deep-sea giants often shows remarkable adaptations. Rather than the simple gills of surface fish, many deep-sea creatures have elaborately folded, branching respiratory organs that maximize surface area within compact spaces. These biological origami structures can extract oxygen from water with stunning efficiency, making every molecule count in the oxygen-poor depths. Some giants have abandoned active gill ventilation entirely, instead relying on passive oxygen uptake through their skin. A massive jellyfish, for instance, has enough surface area relative to its metabolic needs that it can absorb sufficient oxygen simply by existing in the water. Its gelatinous body acts as one enormous respiratory surface, eliminating the energy costs of pumping water across gills. The cardiovascular systems of deep-sea giants reflect their oxygen-conserving strategies. Many have slower heart rates and more efficient circulation patterns than their smaller relatives. Their blood moves in careful, measured currents, delivering oxygen precisely where it's needed without waste. Some have multiple hearts or specialized circulation loops that ensure oxygen-rich blood reaches the most metabolically active tissues first. Behavioral adaptations also help giants manage oxygen scarcity. Many deep-sea creatures exhibit what's called metabolic depression, consciously slowing their life processes during periods of extreme oxygen shortage. A giant isopod can reduce its metabolic rate to almost zero, entering a state resembling suspended animation until oxygen levels improve. Only a large animal with substantial energy reserves can afford such dramatic metabolic flexibility. The relationship between oxygen and pressure adds another layer of complexity. At great depths, the high pressure actually helps dissolve more oxygen into body fluids, but it also makes gas exchange more energetically expensive. Larger animals can better afford the energy costs of high-pressure respiration while benefiting more from the increased oxygen solubility. Deep-sea giants have learned to read oxygen like a weather forecast, following subtle gradients and seasonal variations that smaller creatures cannot detect or exploit. They migrate vertically through the water column, tracking optimal oxygen levels with the patience that only large, long-lived creatures possess. Their size allows them to weather the temporary oxygen deserts, while seeking the occasional oases that sustain their magnificent forms. In the deep sea's thin atmosphere of dissolved gases, being large isn't excess but necessity, a solution to the fundamental challenge of extracting life from scarcity, of breathing deeply in places where breath itself has become precious and rare. The deep sea exists in deep time, while surface ecosystems race through cycles of seasons and storms, birth and death. The abyss operates on rhythms that span eons. Here, in waters that have remained largely unchanged for millions of years, evolution has had the luxury of patience, and patience, it turns out, is one of the most powerful forces for creating giants. Consider the chambered nautilus, gliding through deep Pacific waters with the same elegant spiral shell its ancestors perfected 500 million years ago. This living fossil has had 500 million years to refine its design, to experiment with size, to find the optimal proportions for life in the stable depths. Its shell, a masterpiece of mathematical precision, grows larger throughout its lifetime, each chamber a testament to the deep sea's gift of time. The stability of deep ocean environments creates conditions unlike anywhere else on Earth. Surface habitats face constant upheaval, ice ages come and go, continents drift, climate shifts, mountain ranges rise and fall. But 4,000 meters down, the temperature varies by fractions of a degree across centuries. The chemistry remains constant. The pressure stays steady. This environmental reliability allows evolutionary experiments that would be impossible in more volatile habitats. In unstable environments, evolution tends toward rapid adaptation, quick fixes, survival strategies that work in the short term. But the deep sea's constancy permits long-term evolutionary projects. Species can invest hundreds of millions of years in perfecting elaborate body plans, developing intricate life cycles, growing to extraordinary sizes. They become evolution's masterworks, polished by geological time. Many deep-sea giants belong to ancient lineages that predate most life on land. The coelacanth, that massive deep-water fish, once thought extinct, represents a line of evolution stretching back 400 million years. Its muscular fins, designed for navigating rocky underwater terrain, its primitive lung-like swim bladder, its massive size, all reflect eons of refinement in the stable deep. While its relatives experimented with life on land, the coelacanth remained in the depths, growing larger and more specialized with each passing millennium. Horseshoe crabs, those armored giants of shallow continental margins and deep waters, have maintained virtually the same body plan for 450 million years. They survived mass extinctions that wiped out 90% of marine life. Through it all, they've slowly, steadily grown larger, their ancient design proving so efficient that evolution saw little need to change it. In environments where change is unnecessary, gigantism becomes possible. The deep sea's isolation from the catastrophes that reshape surface life creates evolutionary sanctuaries, while asteroid impacts and volcanic eruptions devastate shallow water ecosystems. The abyss remains largely untouched. This protection allows lineages to pursue evolutionary strategies that would be suicidal in more chaotic environments. They can afford to grow slowly, reproduce infrequently, live for centuries. Time is their ally rather than their enemy. The evolutionary timeline of deep-sea gigantism reveals patterns that span geological epochs. During the Ordovician period, over 400 million years ago, the first cephalopods began experimenting with large shells in deep ocean environments. By the Devonian, massive armored fish were cruising through ancient deep seas. The Permian saw the evolution of enormous marine reptiles that would eventually give rise to even larger forms in the Mesozoic. Each mass extinction event that devastated surface life left the deep sea relatively unscathed, creating opportunities for surviving lineages to radiate into larger sizes. The end Permian extinction, which eliminated 96% of marine species, barely touched many deep-water communities. These survivors inherited a world with reduced competition and abundant evolutionary opportunity. Over millions of years, they slowly expanded into the ecological niches left vacant by their extinct relatives. The competition patterns in these ancient environments also encourage gigantism. In newly formed or rapidly changing ecosystems, species face intense pressure to reproduce quickly and exploit resources before conditions change. But in the stable deep, competition plays out over much longer timescales. Species can invest decades or centuries in reaching maturity, growing larger throughout their extended lifespans. The luxury of time transforms competitive pressure from a sprint into a marathon. The deep-sea corals exemplify this patient approach to gigantism. Some black coral colonies are over 4,000 years old, older than written history, still slowly adding to their massive structures. They represent not individual organisms, but dynasties, multi-generational projects in architectural biology. Their size reflects not rapid growth but persistence, the accumulation of thousands of years of patient construction. Each polyp adds its tiny contribution to structures that can eventually span entire underwater mountains. Deep water sharks like the Greenland shark push this longevity to extraordinary extremes. Recent research suggests these massive creatures may live over 400 years, possibly reaching 500. They grow throughout their lives, adding size decade by decade, century by century. A large Greenland shark swimming through Arctic waters today may have been alive when Shakespeare was writing his plays. Its enormous size represents not metabolic excess but the simple mathematics of centuries, each year adding imperceptible growth to an already magnificent frame. The evolutionary strategies that produce deep-sea giants often require immense timescales to develop. The symbiotic relationships between giant tube worms and chemosynthetic bacteria didn't emerge overnight. They represent millions of years of coevolution of two entirely different forms of life learning to cooperate so intimately that they become a single functional unit. Only in the stable deep could such elaborate partnerships evolve and persist. The bacteria learned to process toxic chemicals while the worms provided housing and protection, a biological contract written over millions of years. Genetic isolation in the deep sea creates additional opportunities for gigantism. Deep ocean basins are separated by ridge systems and trenches that can isolate populations for millions of years. This isolation allows different populations to experiment with different solutions to environmental challenges. Some develop elaborate bioluminescent displays, others invest in massive size. The deep sea becomes a laboratory for evolutionary experimentation, with time measured in geological epochs, and results that can take millions of years to evaluate. The fossil record reveals that deep-sea gigantism is not a recent phenomenon, but an ancient strategy. Giant marine reptiles like plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs evolved enormous size in deep Mesozoic seas. Ancient ammonites grew shells over 6 feet in diameter, their coiled chambers creating buoyancy systems that allowed them to hover in deep water like living submarines. The deep has been growing giants for hundreds of millions of years, suggesting that the conditions that favor large size are fundamental features of deep ocean environments rather than temporary quirks. Modern deep-sea giants often show remarkable evolutionary conservatism, maintaining body plans that have worked for millions of years. The giant squid belongs to a cephalopod lineage that has been experimenting with large size for over 200 million years. Its enormous eyes, perfectly adapted for gathering scarce photons in the abyss, its powerful tentacles equipped with rotating hooks, its sophisticated nervous system capable of rapid color changes, all represent refinements of designs that have been tested across geological time. Evolution doesn't reinvent what already works perfectly. Climate stability in the deep ocean creates conditions where slow growth strategies become not just viable, but optimal. Surface organisms must race to reproduce before seasonal changes make survival impossible. Winter kills, droughts, eliminate populations, Storms reshape entire ecosystems overnight, but deep-sea creatures can afford to invest decades in growth before attempting reproduction. Some don't reach sexual maturity until they're 50 years old, an impossibly risky strategy in less stable environments, but perfectly reasonable in the unchanging depths. The absence of catastrophic disturbance in many deep-sea environments means that evolutionary arms races proceed at geological pace rather than ecological time. Predator and prey relationships evolve slowly, methodically, allowing for the development of elaborate defenses and sophisticated hunting strategies. Giant deep-sea creatures often represent the culmination of million-year evolutionary competitions, their size the result of ancient struggles played out across deep time. They are the winners of contests so long that entire mountain ranges rose and fell during the competition. In the deep sea's cathedral of time, where change is measured in millions of years rather than seasons, gigantism emerges not as evolutionary excess, but as evolutionary wisdom, the patient accumulation of size across spans of time that dwarf human civilization, creating creatures so magnificent they seem to belong more to legend than to science. Living proof that in a world with enough time, life will always find a way to become extraordinary. The deep ocean is the largest living space on Earth, yet it remains the loneliest. Imagine a cathedral so vast that you could place every city on the planet inside it, and still have room for more cathedrals. Now imagine that cathedral nearly empty, with perhaps a single worshipper in each 100-mile stretch of pew. This is the reality of deep-sea life, where space is infinite, but company is impossibly rare. In this universe of liquid solitude, the mathematics of encounters change everything. On land or in shallow waters, animals bump into each other constantly. Competition for territory, for mates, for food, happens on scales measured in meters or kilometers. But in the deep sea, individuals of the same species might be separated by hundreds of miles of empty water. Meeting another creature becomes not a daily occurrence but a once-in-a-lifetime event. This extreme isolation creates evolutionary pressures unlike anywhere else on Earth. When encounters are rare, every meeting matters enormously. There's no opportunity to practice social skills, no chance to assess multiple potential mates, no luxury of being choosy about food. When you meet something in the deep sea, whether it's prey, predator, or potential partner, you need to make that encounter count. Size becomes a language in these vast, empty spaces. In crowded environments, animals often rely on speed, agility, or camouflage to avoid conflict. But when you might encounter only a handful of other creatures in your entire lifetime, intimidation through sheer size becomes a more valuable strategy than evasion. A massive deep-sea creature doesn't need to fight often. Its presence alone settles most disputes before they begin. The Japanese spider crab exemplifies this approach to social architecture. With legs spanning 12 feet, it's not built for speed or stealth. Instead, it commands respect through presence alone. When two spider crabs encounter each other on the seafloor, their interaction is like a diplomatic meeting between nations. Each assesses the other's size, age, and condition. Conflicts are rare, because the larger individual's superiority is immediately apparent. Size eliminates the need for costly battles. Population density in the deep sea is so low that traditional territorial behavior becomes meaningless. Why defend a specific patch of seafloor when there are thousands of square miles of identical habitat nearby? Instead, deep-sea giants often become nomadic, following food sources across vast distances. Their large size provides the energy reserves needed for these epic journeys, allowing them to cross empty ocean basins in search of scarce resources. The rarity of encounters also transforms reproductive strategies. Many deep-sea creatures are hermaphroditic, capable of mating with any individual they encounter regardless of sex. This flexibility becomes crucial when potential mates are separated by vast distances. Some species have evolved the ability to self-fertilize if no partner appears, though they prefer to reproduce sexually when possible. Others, like certain deep-sea anglerfish, have developed extreme sexual dimorphism, where tiny males permanently fuse to massive females, ensuring that reproduction is possible whenever the opportunity arises. Communication across these enormous distances requires specialized adaptations. Bioluminescent displays become beacons in the darkness, visible for miles in the clear deep water. Larger animals can produce brighter, more elaborate light shows that carry farther through the abyss. Some deep-sea creatures use low-frequency sound waves that can travel hundreds of miles through the ocean. Their large bodies capable of producing and detecting infrasonic calls that smaller animals cannot generate or perceive. The predator-prey dynamics of low-density environments favor size in unique ways. In crowded ecosystems, predators often rely on surprise attacks or pack-hunting strategies. But in the deep sea's vast emptiness, encountering prey is so rare that predators must be absolutely certain of success when opportunities arise. Large size increases hunting success rates dramatically. A massive mouth can engulf a wider variety of prey sizes. Powerful muscles can overpower struggling victims. Extended reach allows capture of prey that might otherwise escape into the endless darkness. The concept of personal space takes on entirely different meaning in the abyss. Surface animals often maintain territories measured in acres or square miles. But deep-sea giants might consider thousands of cubic miles of water as their personal domain. They become living landmarks in the empty deep, their massive forms serving as reference points in a world without geography. Migration patterns in low-density environments also favor larger size. Many deep-sea creatures undertake vertical migrations that span thousands of meters, traveling from the deep ocean floor to the twilight zone and back each day. These journeys, equivalent to climbing and descending a mountain daily, require enormous energy reserves that only large bodies can provide. The largest migrants can access food resources across multiple depth zones, giving them advantages unavailable to smaller, more restricted species. Social learning, so important for surface animals, becomes nearly impossible in the deep sea's isolation. Young deep-sea creatures rarely have opportunities to observe and learn from adults of their species. Instead, they must rely on instinctive behaviors encoded in their genes. Large size provides a buffer against the mistakes that inexperienced individuals inevitably make. A massive young creature can survive errors that would kill smaller, more vulnerable animals. The psychology of size in solitary environments creates interesting feedback loops. Large animals not only benefit from intimidation, but also from the confidence that comes with size. They move through their environment with the assurance of apex predators, even when they're not actively hunted. This confidence affects every aspect of their behavior, from their willingness to explore new areas, to their ability to claim the best feeding sites when food appears. Even mating displays are transformed by the vast spaces of the deep sea. Courtship behaviors that might be subtle in crowded environments become bold and extravagant in the abyss. Large size allows for more impressive displays, brighter bioluminescent patterns, more elaborate dances. These spectacular shows can be seen across great distances, turning the entire ocean into a stage for romantic theater. The deep sea's social architecture rewards patience above all else. In an environment where encounters are rare, the ability to wait for the right opportunity becomes more valuable than quick reflexes or aggressive behavior. Large animals, with their slow metabolisms and extended lifespans, excel at this waiting game. They can afford to be selective about their interactions, choosing only the encounters that offer the greatest benefits while avoiding unnecessary risks. In the deep sea's empire of solitude, being large means being sovereign, ruling over vast territories of liquid space, where the crown goes not to the quickest or the cleverest, but to the most magnificent, the most patient, the most enduring presence in an endless realm of gentle darkness. Even in the deep sea's empire of giants, not everything grows large. Scattered throughout the abyss are creatures that have chosen entirely different strategies for survival, remaining small in a world that seems designed for the enormous. These exceptions illuminate the boundaries of gigantism, revealing where the advantages of size break down, and other approaches to deep-sea life become more successful. The deep-sea's smallest residents often inhabit the most extreme niches, places where even the physics of gigantism cannot provide solutions. In the crushing depths of hadal trenches, below 6,000 meters, some organisms remain microscopic not by choice but by necessity. The pressure here exceeds 1,000 atmospheres, creating conditions where large cellular structures simply cannot maintain their integrity. Bacteria and single-celled organisms thrive in these ultimate depths, precisely because their small size distributes pressure more evenly across their minimal structure. Interstitial fauna, creatures that live between grains of sediment on the seafloor, represent another category where small size becomes advantageous. These microscopic animals navigate spaces measured in fractions of millimeters, threading their way through sandy labyrinths where larger creatures could never venture. Their world is one of surface tension and molecular forces, where the physics that govern large animals become irrelevant. Here, being tiny means access to an entire hidden ecosystem that giants cannot even perceive. Some deep-sea creatures remain small because their ecological niche simply doesn't reward size. Certain parasitic copepods that live on the gills of deep-sea fish have evolved to be nearly invisible, so small they can feed without their hosts noticing. For these creatures, stealth trumps size. Their survival depends on remaining undetected, and gigantism would be a death sentence in their secretive lifestyle. The metabolic ceiling that limits even the largest deep-sea giants becomes visible when we examine the boundaries of what's physically possible. The square-cube law eventually defeats every strategy for growing larger. As animals increase in size, their volume grows faster than their surface area, creating unsolvable problems for gas exchange, waste removal, and nutrient distribution. Even the most perfectly adapted deep-sea giant eventually hits a wall where the physics of being alive simply cannot support additional size. The colossal squid, magnificent as it is, appears to be approaching this metabolic ceiling. Its enormous body requires a circulatory system with 3 hearts to maintain blood flow. Its massive brain, the largest of any invertebrate, consumes enormous amounts of energy. Recent studies suggest that colossal squid may be living right at the edge of what's metabolically sustainable for a creature of their design. They represent evolution pushing gigantism to its absolute limits. Certain deep-sea environments actively select against large size. In the narrow confines of underwater caves, or the tight spaces around hydrothermal vent chimneys, being large becomes a liability. Creatures in these environments often remain small to navigate restricted passages and exploit resources in confined spaces. The deep sea's geography isn't uniformly vast, and in its cramped corners, different rules apply. Some apparent giants of the deep sea are actually collective organisms, challenging our understanding of what constitutes a single individual. The siphonophore Priodobia can stretch over 130 feet in length, making it longer than a blue whale. But this enormous creature is actually a colony of hundreds of specialized individuals, each no larger than a grape. The giant is really a biological city, achieving massive size through cooperation rather than individual growth. These colonial organisms reveal an alternative pathway to effective large size in the deep sea. Rather than growing a single enormous body with all its metabolic challenges, some creatures achieve gigantic dimensions by linking smaller, more manageable units. Each component remains small enough to function efficiently, while the colony as a whole gains the advantages of large size for communication, prey capture, and predator deterrence. Temperature boundaries also limit gigantism in certain deep-sea environments, around hydrothermal vents, where water temperatures can exceed the boiling point of water at the surface. Even heat-adapted organisms must remain relatively small. Large bodies cannot dissipate heat quickly enough to survive in these extreme thermal environments. The creatures that thrive around vents tend to be small, allowing them to regulate their temperature more effectively in the scalding water. Chemical toxicity creates another limitation on size in certain deep-sea niches. Areas with high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide or heavy metals can support life, but only in small, specialized forms. Large bodies would accumulate toxic substances faster than they could eliminate them. Small organisms, with their higher surface area to volume ratios, can more effectively manage toxic loads through rapid excretion and specialized detoxification systems. Energy flux patterns in some deep-sea environments favor small size over large. In areas where food arrives in tiny, widely scattered particles, small organisms with high metabolic rates can exploit these resources more efficiently than large, slow-moving giants. The mathematical advantage of large size in food-scarce environments assumes that food comes in packages large enough to justify the energy expenditure of capture. Where food exists only as microscopic particles, small size with high activity levels becomes the winning strategy. Recent discoveries in the deepest ocean trenches have revealed entire ecosystems of small organisms thriving under conditions previously thought impossible for complex life. These creatures have evolved entirely different solutions to the challenges of deep-sea existence. Relying on biochemical innovations rather than physical size, they produce specialized proteins that function under extreme pressure, develop unique metabolic pathways that operate efficiently in near-freezing temperatures, and create cellular structures that resist deformation under crushing force. The existence of these small deep-sea specialists reminds us that evolution is an opportunist, finding ways to exploit every available niche. While gigantism represents one successful strategy for deep-sea life, it is not the only strategy. The deep sea's true diversity lies not just in its giants, but in the full spectrum of sizes, from microscopic bacteria to colossal squid, each perfectly adapted to their particular corner of the abyss. These exceptions prove that the deep sea's tendency toward gigantism is not a universal rule, but a context-dependent strategy. Understanding where gigantism fails helps us better appreciate where it succeeds, revealing the precise environmental conditions that favor enormous size and the equally precise conditions where staying small remains the wisest choice in evolution's ancient game of survival. The first encounters between humans and deep-sea giants were not scientific expeditions but accidents of survival, moments when the abyss briefly surrendered its secrets to terrified sailors who lived to tell impossible tales. In 1861, the French gunboat Alecton spotted something extraordinary off the coast of the Canary Islands, a massive squid floating near the surface, its tentacles longer than the ship's masts. The crew attempted to capture it, managing to secure part of the creature before it broke free, leaving behind only fragments, and a story that would be dismissed as sailors' fantasy for decades. These early encounters shaped humanity's relationship with deep-sea giants in profound ways. The creatures were too large to be real, too strange to be natural, too powerful to be anything but mythological. They entered our collective imagination, not as animals, but as monsters, inhabitants of a realm beyond human understanding. The kraken of Norse legend, the sea serpents of medieval maps, the leviathans of biblical texts, all found new life in these fragmentary encounters with actual deep-sea giants. The cultural impact of these discoveries rippled far beyond maritime communities. Victorian society, obsessed with cataloguing and understanding the natural world, struggled to incorporate these giants into their orderly vision of creation. How could creatures of such impossible proportions exist in waters that were supposed to be lifeless? The deep-sea giants challenged not just scientific understanding, but philosophical assumptions about the nature of life itself. Jules Verne captured this cultural confusion in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Published in 1870, his giant squid battle with the Nautilus reflected genuine uncertainty about what lay beneath the waves. Were these creatures intelligent? Malevolent? Could they threaten human vessels? Verne's fiction blended scientific speculation with primal fear, creating images that would influence popular perception of deep-sea giants for generations. The development of deep-sea exploration technology gradually transformed these mythological encounters into scientific observations. The invention of the bathysphere in the 1930s allowed humans to witness deep-sea giants in their natural environment for the first time. William Beebe's descriptions of bioluminescent creatures glimpsed through the bathysphere's tiny windows read like poetry, but they were grounded in direct observation rather than imagination. Photography changed everything. The first images of giant deep-sea creatures, captured by automated cameras lowered into the abyss, provided undeniable evidence of their existence. These photographs, often blurry and dramatic, showed creatures that seemed to belong in science fiction rather than scientific journals. The public's fascination with these images helped drive funding for deep-sea research, creating a positive feedback loop between discovery and exploration. The Japanese spider crab became an early ambassador for deep-sea giants, its impressive size and relatively accessible habitat making it a frequent subject of documentary films and museum displays. Unlike the elusive giant squid, spider crabs could be captured alive and displayed in aquariums, allowing the public to witness deep-sea gigantism firsthand. These encounters helped normalize the concept of enormous deep-sea creatures, making subsequent discoveries seem less impossible. Television documentaries brought deep-sea giants into homes around the world, transforming them from scientific curiosities into cultural icons. Jacques Cousteau's underwater films in the 1960s and 70s presented these creatures not as monsters but as marvels, magnificent adaptations to an alien environment. This shift in presentation began to change public perception from fear to wonder, from revulsion to fascination. The discovery of hydrothermal vent ecosystems in 1977 revealed entire communities of giant tube worms and other massive creatures thriving in conditions previously thought impossible for complex life. These discoveries expanded the definition of habitability and sparked speculation about life on other worlds. The deep-sea giants became not just Earth curiosities but potential templates for extraterrestrial life. Modern submersible technology has made encounters with deep-sea giants increasingly common, Yet these meetings remain profoundly moving experiences for the researchers who witness them. Scientists describe seeing a giant squid in its natural habitat as transformative, a moment when the abstract measurements and preserved specimens suddenly become living, breathing reality. These encounters often inspire lifelong dedications to deep-sea research and conservation. The vulnerability of deep-sea giants to human activities became apparent as industrial fishing expanded into deeper waters. These creatures, evolved for stability and longevity, proved tragically susceptible to overfishing. Their slow growth rates and late reproductive maturity meant that populations once depleted could take centuries to recover. The orange roughy fishery collapse in the 1990s provided a sobering example of how quickly human activities could devastate deep-sea giant populations. Deep-sea mining presents an emerging threat to these ancient creatures. The polymetallic nodules scattered across abyssal plains often serve as habitat for sessile giants like deep-sea corals and sponges. Mining operations would destroy communities that took millennia to establish, eliminating creatures older than human civilization in pursuit of metals for electronic devices. The irony is profound, using technology to destroy the very environments that inspired our understanding of life's possibilities. Conservation efforts for deep-sea giants face unique challenges. These creatures live in international waters, beyond the jurisdiction of any single nation. Their habitats are vast and largely unexplored, making it difficult to assess population sizes or identify critical areas for protection. Traditional conservation approaches, developed for terrestrial and shallow marine environments, prove inadequate for the scale and remoteness of deep-sea ecosystems. The slow life histories of deep-sea giants make them particularly vulnerable to environmental changes. A deep-sea coral that takes decades to reach reproductive maturity and centuries to build a significant structure cannot quickly adapt to changing conditions. Climate change, with its effects on ocean temperature, chemistry, and circulation patterns, poses long-term threats to creatures that evolved in stable environments over millions of years. Recent technological advances have revolutionized our ability to study deep-sea giants without disturbing them. Remotely operated vehicles equipped with high-definition cameras can observe these creatures for hours without the noise and lights that might alter their behavior. Environmental DNA sampling allows researchers to detect the presence of giant species without ever seeing the animals themselves, using genetic fragments left in the water to map distributions and estimate population sizes. Citizen science projects now allow people around the world to participate in deep-sea research, analyzing footage from research expeditions to identify and catalogue deep-sea giants. These collaborative efforts have accelerated the pace of discovery while creating emotional connections between the public and these remote creatures. When ordinary people spend hours watching deep-sea footage, looking for the telltale signs of giant organisms, they develop a personal investment in protecting these environments. The deep-sea giants teach us patience in an impatient world. Their slow growth, extended lifespans, and measured responses to environmental change offer alternative models for success that challenge our assumptions about efficiency and productivity. In a culture obsessed with rapid growth and immediate results, these creatures demonstrate the power of persistence, the wisdom of waiting, the strength that comes from enduring rather than conquering. As we stand at the threshold of potentially devastating deep-sea mining operations and face the mounting pressures of climate change, the deep-sea giants serve as ambassadors for an entire realm that remains largely unknown and unprotected. Their magnificent forms remind us that the ocean holds wonders we have barely begun to understand, creatures whose existence stretches our imagination and challenges our assumptions about the limits of life itself. The mathematics of deep-sea gigantism reveal evolutionary principles that extend far beyond the ocean's depths, illuminating fundamental truths about how life responds to environmental challenges across all scales and habitats. When we understand why creatures grow enormous in the abyss, we begin to see the elegant equations that govern adaptation everywhere. From the smallest microbes to the largest mammals, from the briefest life cycles to the most enduring forms of life on Earth, the deep-sea giants demonstrate that optimization is not about finding a single perfect solution, but about discovering the solution that works best within specific constraints. Surface-dwelling animals optimize for speed, agility, and rapid reproduction, because their environment rewards quick responses to changing conditions. But deep-sea creatures optimize for different variables altogether: patience, efficiency, and endurance. Their enormous size represents not biological excess, but mathematical precision. the exact proportions needed to extract maximum benefit from minimum resources. This principle of context-dependent optimization appears throughout biology. Arctic animals tend toward larger sizes for thermal efficiency. Following Bergmann's rule, island species often evolve toward either gigantism or dwarfism depending on available resources and predation pressure. Cave-dwelling creatures frequently lose pigmentation and develop enhanced senses. Each environment writes its own equations for success, and life solves them with remarkable consistency. The metabolic scaling laws that favor gigantism in the deep sea also illuminate broader patterns in how energy flows through living systems. The relationship between body size and metabolic rate, first described by Max Kleiber in the 1930s, reveals that larger organisms are inherently more energy efficient per unit of body mass. This scaling relationship appears across virtually all forms of life, from bacteria to whales, suggesting fundamental physical constraints on how biological systems can be organized. Deep-sea giants also demonstrate the power of trade-offs in evolutionary strategy. They sacrifice speed for endurance, rapid reproduction for longevity, metabolic intensity for efficiency. These trade-offs illuminate a fundamental principle of adaptation, that every evolutionary advantage comes with corresponding costs. Understanding these trade-offs helps us predict how organisms might respond to environmental changes and why certain combinations of traits appear together, while others remain impossible. The extreme longevity of many deep-sea giants reveals patterns that extend our understanding of aging and mortality across all life forms. Creatures that live for centuries or millennia challenge our assumptions about the inevitability of senescence. Some deep-sea corals show no signs of aging after thousands of years, suggesting that under the right conditions, biological immortality may be achievable. These discoveries have profound implications for understanding aging in all organisms, including humans. The relationship between environmental stability and evolutionary experimentation, so evident in deep-sea ecosystems, appears throughout the history of life. Stable environments consistently produce more elaborate, specialized, and often larger organisms than unstable ones. The Cambrian explosion occurred in relatively stable, shallow seas. The great dinosaur radiations took place during periods of climatic stability. The deep-sea giants represent the logical extreme of this pattern, the result of hundreds of millions of years of uninterrupted evolutionary refinement. When we consider the possibility of life on other worlds, deep-sea giants expand our definition of habitability beyond recognition. Traditional astrobiology focused on planets with surface conditions similar to Earth, liquid water under moderate temperatures and pressures. But the deep sea demonstrates that life can thrive in conditions that seem completely hostile to terrestrial organisms. The crushing pressures, near-freezing temperatures, and total darkness of the abyss might actually be more representative of habitable environments throughout the universe than the pleasant conditions we enjoy on Earth's surface. Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, almost certainly harbors a subsurface ocean beneath its frozen shell. This ocean exists in total darkness, under immense pressure, at temperatures near freezing. These conditions nearly perfectly match those of Earth's deep sea. If life exists in Europa's hidden ocean, it might well have evolved gigantism for the same reasons that Earth's abyssal creatures grow enormous. The giants of our own deep sea become templates for imagining life throughout the cosmos. The philosophical implications of deep-sea gigantism challenge our anthropocentric view of optimization and success. Human culture tends to equate bigger with better, faster with superior, newer with improved. But the deep-sea giants suggest alternative definitions of success, based on persistence rather than performance, patience rather than speed, endurance rather than intensity. They represent a different philosophy of existence, one that values stability over growth, conservation over consumption.